Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Ryan S., Mike P., Andy J., and Cindy W. New guest on the program today, Benedikt Kirchgaessler has joined us. Benedikt is the CEO and founder of CyanoGuard, a company that has developed cyanide testing and monitoring solutions that help to optimize cyanide usage and also track it in the mining processes. CyanoGuard technology can also be used in other testing applications such as agricultural, medical, and other natural resource sectors. You can learn more about CyanoGuard via their website. That's cyanoguard.com. Benedikt, thanks for coming on the show and welcome.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Well, why don't we start off here, typically with new guests, maybe getting some of your background and past experience.
Sure. So I have a bit of a let's say diverse background. So I first, after school, I went to business school and worked in the bank. Then I decided I want to have a change of scenery, and I went back to school and studied chemistry. And that's sort of how everything started to roll with CyanoGuard. So I was in my last year of my studies and was working on a novel compound to sense cyanide. Yeah, and that's basically how I got here and how CyanoGuard came into being. Right now, I'm mostly taking care of the product management and the commercial functions at CyanoGuard, but occasionally I'm still involved directly with on-site projects with our mine clients.
And how did that evolve? Talk about just, what sparked the idea, and then, how did you start to grow that network into predominantly this is focused, on mining?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we just had our 5-year anniversary. So we founded in August 2016. So we're just a little bit older than 5 years now. And what happened back then is I was working on this compound, and what I realized is that it's much more efficient and has a much better performance than all the other technologies that were out there. Of course, it wasn't a technology back then. It was just like a research paper that we had. And I figured out that this is a much easier way to test cyanide, and why should this not be used outside of our lab at the university I was back then? And my underlying motivation was really to change the way that analytical chemistry was done, because what I saw, especially with cyanide monitoring, which is one of the most difficult analytes to measure in analytical chemistry, it requires a lot of training and difficult and expensive tools, and that we want to change because our methods are really easy, really straightforward. But it wasn't at the beginning that we said, oh, we want to directly go into the mining. I have a background in chemistry, so I understood a bit of mining, but what really happened is at the beginning we were focused on the food industry. But just after, I think 6 months after we founded the company, we got contacted by a Peruvian mine. And that mine said, well, look, we have a pretty big issue measuring our cyanide reliably and accurately throughout the different shifts. Why don't you take your method and develop a solution that works for us in mining? And yeah, that's what we did. It was in 2017. I visited them, and we had the first prototype built in 2018. And then about a year later, 18 months later, we had the first So
pretty early stage here. Why don't you give the audience just an overview of the company here as far as the overall solution, how it's used, and just describe it for us.
Yeah, so we're a little bit more than 15 people based here in Switzerland, where we produce and do everything. We're mostly focused on the mining industry, as predominantly gold mining, but we also have other areas of application where we also have clients, for example, in the chemical industry, where they use it to track their wastewaters, but also in the food industry. For example, we're catering to one of the largest almond suppliers in Spain that makes sure that their almonds do not contain cyanide. So that's sort of the company. So I would say really 90–95% of all our research are focused on the mining industry, and that's also how we position ourselves as a company to really help solve the cyanide monitoring problem in mining. But we also have other sort of business areas.
For the audience who maybe isn't familiar with this, this is not an area of expertise for myself, although I know a little bit about it, but talk about a typical situation in the mining industry where, the protocols that are in place that are currently used and how this comes in and really, makes it faster, makes it better, creates a database, et cetera. You guys kind of offer both hardware and a software solution that kind of combines everything together. And maybe just talk about, some of the requirements and how this comes in and just really takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, sure. No, maybe I'll start from the top. So just to give you like a brief, overview why cyanide is there in the first place. So in order to, extract gold from ore, you use a chemical process that's called cyanidation. And what cyanide basically does, it binds very strongly to metals, especially gold. And that like a combined gold cyanide complex, you can then very easily extract from your process. And that's the challenge, because you're adding cyanide to it, and cyanide is very expensive and also very toxic. And it's like the single most determining factor whether your process is efficient, meaning you get the most gold out of it with the least amount of operating costs and also water usage, energy. And so you need to track it very closely, because on the one hand, you don't want to have too much, because too much cyanide is expensive and it's toxic, and you need to destroy it at the end before you can release your processed water to, for example, surface waters. But on the other hand, and that's even more damaging for a mine, is you don't want to have too little, because if you have too little cyanide, you won't be able to extract all the gold. So that's like the challenge there with cyanide. And this sounds like a fairly classic engineering process optimization plan, but the issue is that, as I said before, cyanide is one of the most difficult analytes to measure, because it's got a lot of interferences, meaning that you measure other things that mask to be cyanide. And how cyanide monitoring is still done is like a traditional way, it's like a method that hasn't been changed for the last century, is a titration. And there you have an operator basically add a certain reagent to that sample that you draw from the process and waits for a certain color change. And there you might already understand what the problem is, because every operator perceives the color differently. So you don't have like a really reliable standardized figure for your cyanide concentration. That makes it really hard to optimize. And of course, if you have an operator draw the sample, bring it back to the lab, measure it, that takes a long time. And your process, sometimes the cyanidation process works quite fast, and you have it in a time lag. And this is where we come in, is that we standardize the entire process. So there's no more operator decision to be made. It's this one result, whether it's done in Colombia or in Australia, it's always the same result, the same quality of measurement. And it's straightforward. You don't need any equipment, you don't need any training, you don't need a lab, you can do it directly on site.
This is basically, you obviously have a handheld device here, and then also you've got these capsules used for every test.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So we like to look at it as a solution. So it's we do not supply the individual parts, really. It's like one solution. So you have these capsules that you mentioned, it's like the test cartridges. They're single use, and you basically press your sample through this cartridge, and then the properties of the optical property of this cartridge changes, and this optical property change is analyzed by this handheld device. And this handheld device is sort of like an IoT device. That means it's constantly connected to the internet, and it uploads the data in real time to an online platform, including the GPS data. So then the mine manager has all of their cyanide measurement data. They can basically visualize the process in real time and see what their cyanide concentration is and make the necessary adjustments.
Let's get into a few other questions here in a moment, but maybe let's just take us back to the company structure for a moment, and also the management team, Benedikt. The company is private right now. Can you just give the audience an overview of the structure of the company and also some of the management team you'd like to highlight?
So I think if we start from the top, so sort of like our board is composed of, we have a sort of like one part sort of mining focused investors, and on the other hand, more sort of like, I would say like VC type investors. And the board is composed sort of most mining experts, but also, for example, one of our board members is the former CEO of one of the largest analytical equipment manufacturers here in Switzerland. And then one level below, it's sort of like Benjamin, who's our CTO, and myself. And then together with our sort of like senior management team, which is Kasia, who does the production. We have George, who is responsible for the device. And then we have Margaritos, who is our head of mining solution sales. And that's basically how sort of like I would say that the top echelon of the company is structured. And of course, we have, we've got a dedicated software engineering team. We've got a dedicated production team.
Talk about for a moment what challenges are you seeing out there as far as you guys developing your business here? And also, can you maybe talk about some of the competitors that you guys are faced with out there in the market, just to give the audience a flavor if there are other people out there with different solutions, same solutions. Talk about that competitive edge and who you might be competing with, as well as the challenges.
So how we actually like to position ourselves is as sort of the resource. What we want to become the gold standard for cyanide monitoring in the mining industry. And that's, of course, we would like, because all the mines use our solution because we feel it's the best one. But at the same time, we also want to be just there as like an expert resource. If they have like another measurement method, we can also help them to optimize that. And what we mostly compete with is the state of the art. So most mines operate a laboratory because that's the way that it has been. There are some companies out there that provide an automated analyzers that are based on the same technology. But for that, you also need someone on site that manages that device, like with expert knowledge. So and these guys, they mostly focus on very niche areas. What we really offer is we can take over the entire cyanide monitoring and testing needs of a mine site. And also we see ourselves not that much as an equipment provider. So it's not like that we ship you our gear and then you're left alone with it. We're much more like to build a relationship, like it's more like a promise that we will solve all their cyanide monitoring and optimization needs. And so this is how we position ourselves. And I think, the biggest competition for us is the status quo, that people have been measuring cyanide in a certain way for the past decades. And we're coming in basically trying to show them that there are other ways that might be more beneficial for them.
Benedikt, and the company's position is that the mining companies who use cyanide can see better economic results regarding their usage when using CyanoGuard. Talk about for a moment what you guys see from some of the clients that you guys have worked with, as far as, have you seen applications where they're underusing cyanide and is not maximizing the efficiencies or potentially overusing it?
Yeah.
Obviously, that it has ramifications from a cost standpoint and also a productive standpoint. And then how does your solution come in and really just optimize that out, which obviously improves their cost profile?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because usually it's not like one side. It's usually a mixture of both. So like the standard approach to using cyanide is that you use a little bit of excess, that you use more than you need because you don't want to lose gold. But over time, if you look at the mine, there might be some times where they have like a certain set point, they have a certain concentration of cyanide in their process, and they add like a new type of ore, or like which is slightly different, which contains other metals besides gold. And then what happens is that these other metals consume the cyanide away, and then there's not enough there to extract the gold. And then you have for a brief period, maybe just a couple of hours, you have a cyanide under delivery. And during that time, you don't extract everything. And where we come in is that because our measurements are like real time, they can spot these under deliveries much faster and also increase their recoveries. But most times, most of the cost savings, they really come from cyanide savings, meaning we remove the need to overdose the cyanide. And if you look a bit at the financial ramifications, so if you take into account both the cost decrease as well as the output increase, depending on your mine size, it's very very big if you've got like a huge mine with several plants, several processes that run at the same time, or just like one plant. Usually looking at yearly returns of 2 to 10 million with just sort of like improving the monitoring. If you take it one step further, and this is maybe something we can talk later about, is the next step. What we want to do is also provide more of an optimization platform, meaning that the platform doesn't only show you the results, it also gives you advice on how you change the process to make it better. And this is sort of like where we operate. So this range of return per year for a mine.
So a mining company contacts you, give us an idea of that process, the step-by-step, where you guys go through the different considerations, and then you guys give us an example. You probably have a standard example of maybe.
Yeah, I have a very good example. So it's actually one of our latest latest new clients that has just come online a couple of weeks ago. And so it's a mine from Canada, and they contacted us because they were just starting up production, and they were looking for a better way to measure cyanide, and they heard about us from like one of the conferences that we visited. And the first thing that we usually do is when they contact us, we try to inquire some information about their process and what we can help them with. And then the next step is to schedule an online demo, because at the moment travel is still a bit difficult. Usually we try to do this demo on site, but for the moment it's still online. We show them how it works, and then we ask them, if they're interested, and if they're interested, what we usually offer, because the way that we're different to an equipment supplier is that you don't have any capital expenditure with us. It's all purchased on like an operating cost basis. So it's you rent the devices, you purchase the cartridges that you need. So it's more of like a monthly subscription model in a way. And the way that we start is, because we could talk for days and see whether it works or not, but the only way to really find out is to do a pilot. And what we do is we get the specs usually in 1 to 2 weeks. We've got the shipment ready, and then it doesn't take us more. I think to Canada it took us about 3 days. After 3 days, all our equipment is on site. We do an online training. We've got an online training platform for all the operators to become certified on our gear. We do then another test online with them to see if the quality of the measurements is good enough. And then we let them try our solutions for 2 to 3 weeks. And if they want to continue, they just give us a call. We ship them more. Or if they say no, it's not for us, they just send us the stuff back, and that's it. And usually all of this is done within, I would say, a total time is like 5 to 6 weeks. And for this Canadian mine I was talking about, it was actually very nice. So we shipped them in middle of July, and we had the training end of July, and already on I think it was the 9th or the 10th of August, they were already concluding the pilot much earlier than we thought, and went into implemented our solution to the process. So it's really straightforward, and it doesn't really require any sort of like calibration visits on site or anything. It's like we ship them our gear and it works out of the box.
That's great, and the online training, that's fantastic, and it seems like it's very simple, straightforward to use. And obviously the focus is first on the cyanide usage efficiency, but then there's also the downstream applications, like testing water, etc., which is also a very nice little adder. How about like the $2 million example in savings that you provided earlier? Give the audience an idea of what it would cost, maybe on an annual basis, I think is probably better based on that $2 million savings example.
Yeah, that's a good point. So usually where we come in is between 5 and 10%. So it depends really on the process. Usually you have higher costs when you have a larger mine, because you need to take more samples. You have more processes. Of course, then the costs for purchasing our solutions are higher, but at the same time, your savings, your return on investment is also great. So, for example, if we look at a standard case, it would be roughly $100,000 to $200,000 a year for a mine. But at the same time, they would look at a return upwards of let's say $2 million. So it's definitely, the ratio is still good, and it's also not that they're locked in forever. So they can try it for 2 or 3 weeks, and usually during that period you can already see the impact. And so there's not like a huge period that you need to wait like for a year to see any returns. Like this goes very fast, and you can decide, well, do you want to use it or not? And then like if you just purchase it on a monthly basis, of course you don't have to pay the $100,000. You just pay usually like a 10th or a 12th of it.
Yeah, that's great. Pretty attractive. How about your long-term outlook for cyanide usage in mining operations? I mean, my view on this is that I think it's something that's going to continue for many, many decades yet to come, if not a lot longer. But, there are some efforts to come up with more environmentally friendly chemical processes to eliminate cyanide usage. In North America, I tend to think of names such as EnviroLeach, and also Group 11 comes to mind, among others. That's just in North America, of course, but obviously not all deposit types are amenable to these other types of approaches. Do you see CyanoGuard technology being applied to other monitoring testing of other chemicals, or potential partnerships to use company IP based on these other types of chemical processes that people are trying to try that might work on certain deposit types? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think this is actually a very good point, because this is something also that I think about, when we look at the future of CyanoGuard. So first, let me start off maybe circling back to what I mentioned at the beginning, to our mission. So our goal, our long-term mission is to bring the analytical chemistry into the hands of like everyone, that you don't have to be a chemist. We take care of the chemistry side, and we'll make it really easy and safe for you to do that. So this is our goal. Cyanide is just the first step. It's sort of like our proof of concept that we can take care of one very, very critical chemical in the mining industry. And we will, of course, want to extend that, and not only on the hardware side, but provide sort of like a process optimization platform dedicated for the mining industry. So it will not be only focused on cyanide in the future, but also on other analytes. And also we want to move beyond just precious metals, because with the electric mobility revolution coming on, like, you need a lot more metals, and that's not only gold and silver. So we definitely want to change our scope a bit. The second part, what you're saying, like with cyanide, first I'll give a statement as a chemist in me. So chemically, there is nothing more efficient than cyanide, because cyanide has just this property that it binds very well to metals, and there's not really another compound which can do it that well. So you will always have a challenge to match that. And even in the European Union, where you had a couple of really bad disasters due to bad cyanide management, there were discussions about a ban, but even the European Union decided not to ban it for the reason because there's not a similarly effective method around. And even some of the methods that I looked at, for example, I think there's an Australian company which works with an amino acid with glycine, and even they use decreased amounts of cyanide. I think this is a good way to go, that you don't go for like a super radical solution, because that will cost the mine a lot of money if their efficiency is compromised. And what you said, that also not all of the ore types are amenable to the novel extraction agents. And still in that case, you still would need to monitor chemicals. So I think there's always an opportunity for an optimization and for a solution provider like us.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's a lot of other places you could look, and you could go into places. You mentioned non-precious metals. You could go into base metals, and also different types of metals such as uranium, which obviously is radiation related. So the methods in taking all this together with both software and hardware, I think there's a big IP component that translates into a lot of these other sectors. I do suspect that you're still raising money on occasion, given that this is a fairly early stage company. You guys have investors to support the company and growth. Do you expect to raise capital again in the future? And maybe what are you looking for should you do that in terms of ideal investors?
Yeah, we'll definitely raise capital, because what we're currently focused on, we're really scaling the production. So at the moment, we're having a bit of a crunch with the delivery. So we would like to decrease our delivery times, because basically our pipeline, our backlog is until the end of the year, beginning of the next of the year. We already have delivery commitments. So this is also what we're going to be raising money in the next couple of months for, is to scale up our team, really to help us with production and to accelerate our rollout. Because of course we can continue the current pace, but it's going to take us much longer to serve all the mine sites that would like to use our solutions. And what we're looking for in an investor is someone that really understands the mining industry. Ideally, they already had investments in the mining technology sector, or just in the mining industry, and are sort of familiar with the operational challenges of a mine and how also the mining industry operates. It's not a very fast industry, but it's a very conservative industry, and therefore you need to have a different kind of time horizon, especially as a young startup. And we are looking for investors that understand that, and that also might be able to help us with their relationships or with their knowledge in the mining industry. That being said, we're not sort of focused on any geography, so most of our investors are from outside Europe. We've got a large part of our investors come from the Americas, from the US mostly. So we're definitely open. If there's someone out there that's interested, that likes to support what we're doing, that believes in our mission, we're definitely glad to get in touch.
Okay, and Benedikt talked a little bit more about just, obviously probably Canadians, Australians, United States, Europe, as far as the different geographic regions. And then also, I suspect there's probably some type of minimum, and then also that they are accredited investors.
So in terms of the sophistication of the investor, of course, we're looking for someone which has, a bit of experience in non-listed type of investments. So it's fairly straightforward process in Switzerland to become an investor, an equity investor. the same time, we also want to look out for someone that understands the process a bit, because it's better to build a relationship long term. From a ticket size, we're usually looking at something between minimum size between I would say 750 to $1 million US. That's something that would be helpful for us, because that's also something that we can then really work with.
Well, that brings me to the next question. As you guys continue to move down here and continue to grow the company, is there a potential public listing in sight? Is that part of the company strategy, one? And then also, if so, is anything planned on a listing, say, in the next couple of years?
So I think it's still very early. Of course, as a founder, I've thought about it a fair bit. It's not a focus right now, but because what our biggest goal right now is to really become the gold standard, to really roll out our technology to get like a global footprint that we really can, help the gold mining industry, not only in a certain geography. So this is what we're really focused on. The first, build this relationship with the market, with the clients. But of course, I would say further down the road, I think this might be definitely something to consider. There's a few, specialized indices like in Toronto or in Australia that are specialized for these sort of like mining technology providers that we are. And I think in the right time, definitely I think an option worth looking at.
Probably makes sense from a primary listing either in Canada or Australia, maybe the UK, but most likely probably your best options, as well as just an OTC listing in the US when the time is right there and you guys think it's a good time to provide that next step. How about ESG considerations? This continues to gain traction right now as far as ESG goes, and it fits in really well with you guys, CyanoGuard and the solution that you guys have. Any comments on ESG and also how you might be attracting ESG money to this company?
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's actually how we start. It depends always on the kind of contact you speak with, but if you talk to a bit more sort of like more corporate functions in the mining industry, that's something that's increasingly important for them, because if you have health issues, like any high injury ratio or environmental issues that directly affect, when you're listed mining company, directly affects your shareholder value. So they're very sensitive. And we already, back in 2018, we were talking about a project. I think it was back then, it was the Chief Innovation Officer from Barrick, I think Michelle. And we talk about her because cyanide is still a very controversial issue, especially when you go to communities that are very heavily dependent on mine. They're very cautious and worry about cyanide usage because there have been some really bad incidents. And then there's always like a bit of mistrust between the different operators and different stakeholders. And that's where we see that we can come in, because the way that our technology works is that you cannot fake a measurement. Like every measurement is encrypted on the device and sent to the platform, and it has a unique sort of a fingerprint, a digital fingerprint, where we can say, okay, this measurement has been done by this operator at this time at this location, and you have like full transparency. And what we actually were talking about with Michelle back then is to provide a system that shows to the community that cyanide is really well managed and that they know the concentrations in real time. And the ultimate goal that unfortunately didn't turn out because there were some personal changes, so we couldn't continue this project. But we hope we can take it up in the future, is because basically, the social license and the health and safety, like the ESG dimensions that you mentioned, they're becoming more and more important. And cyanide, I think, is one of the most controversial topics in this area. And I think if you can provide transparency, if you can show, okay, it's not the mine that's doing it, it's like an independent third company that's showing that the measurements are done well, I think that would go a long way, especially with community relations.
Very good points. And I forgot to ask earlier, is there any companies specifically that you can mention where CyanoGuard is currently deployed? I'm sure that some are probably private as far as what you can.
I can share one company because we already did a feature with them. I can just say that we have well-known gold mining sites in Australia, Canada, Peru, and I think that's it for now. We also used to be in Finland with one very well-known one. But the one that I can mention is actually it's a supplier, it's a lab operator for a Colombian gold mine. It's called Ecolab, and they're like I think it's a pretty big US American company, and they've got a sort of like a subsidiary in Colombia called Malco Water, and they're doing all the cyanide measurement. And they found out about our technology, and they were one of our first customers in Colombia. and they just recently also implemented the system into their process at the client side, and they're very happy with it. We even did an interview and a feature with them on our website, so this is something that we can share.
Is there any trial opportunities, for companies who may, maybe think that their process is currently good, but you guys want to, prove to them that you guys can make it even better? Is there any trial opportunities out there as far as, people wanting to trial the product?
Yeah, this is actually the way that we like to build relationships, because Marita, our head of sales, she can probably talk for hours together with me about how great our product is, but it's nothing until we prove it. And so the way that we like to build a relationship, and it's usually how most of our clients started with, is we ship them just our product. So it requires very little upfront discussion or anything, and just tell us a little bit about your process. We ship them the gear, they try it out. If they like it or not, if they like it, they keep it and continue using it. If they don't like it, they ship it back to us. So these pilot trials that we're advertising, we offer them pretty much to I think most gold mining companies. It works for them. And if they say, well, I think we've got a great process, I would like to challenge them that we can do better. And if not, they don't need to pay for it.
That sounds pretty good. How about company objectives over the next, say, 18 months or so? What do you expect to accomplish?
First of all, we really want to, serve the partners, the clients that we're currently working with, and become sort of the gold standard for cyanide monitoring and gold mining, especially in the Americas. We've got a sort of a big focus on first Americas and then Australia, and we really want to make a footprint so that we have like a dozen of mines that use our technology on a constant basis. That's sort of, as I said before, become the gold standard for cyanide monitoring and gold and silver mining. Then I would say in about 6 to 8 months, we want to roll out our online platform to more clients, because some of them are already using it for the monitoring, so they just get displayed and visualize their data. But we want to take it a step further, that we have a proprietary algorithm to help them optimize their process. So it's not only showing them the results, but also providing decision support to the managers, saying, look, you've got a suboptimal, like your cyanide concentration at this spot in this tank is too low, you need to redose. Or if we, at the end, our system realizes there's a too high cyanide concentration at the end in the barren solution where there should be minimal cyanide, and we say, okay, dose less cyanide so you're not wasting that much. And that's sort of like the, say, 6 to 8 months, and that will even increase this figure that I was mentioning earlier. It's like 2 to 10 million, even more, because it will automate and do a standardized optimization, and that will definitely have an impact on less cyanide usage and also decrease the environmental impact. And then I'd say it's, for the 18 months, going to be a bit tight, but about in 2 years, I think we're already now working with other mines. So we're looking at zinc project opportunity in India, but we definitely want to expand our applications from gold and silver mining to other metal mining, for example, like copper, zinc, and maybe in the future even iron ore.
Benedikt, if there's any interest from our audiences, perhaps private investors or even a mine manager or compliance technician maybe listening in, why should they consider CyanoGuard, and what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So I'll start with the second part first. So the best way to get in touch with us is either give us a call or send us an email to mining.solutions@cyanoguard.com, and I'm reading this email, and all of my sort of like the solutions team are on this, so we'll definitely get back to you very quickly. So that would be the best way to get in contact. And the first question, why should you consider CyanoGuard? I think it's very straightforward, is because we have a very straightforward value proposition. We say, okay, well, you can try out our technology to optimize your process. If it doesn't work, you don't owe us anything, and there's not much to lose. Like, it doesn't require a lot of time or a lot of investment or a lot of meetings on site. It's just we ship our gear anywhere in the world, and people can just try it out. It's definitely for the clients. And I think if I would speak to an investor, why they should invest is, I think, there's a huge opportunity. The mining industry is growing, especially with all these trends in electric mobility that's going on. The demand for minerals will be higher and higher, and the amount of deposits in the world are finite. There's not an infinite amount around, so you need to become more efficient. And this is, in the end, the goal of our mission in mining is to help mines become more efficient and more sustainable.
A lot of good reasons, a lot of good points here, and it sounds like for any operating company that has a mine, it probably makes sense to give it a try. And it sounds like that there's pretty much no risk in giving that a try and seeing how it works out for them. So I appreciate that, and I also want to thank you for taking the time to introduce CyanoGuard to our audience. I want to wish you the best of luck and continued success, and hopefully you'll come back at some point to update.
No, Andrew, thanks so much for having me. It was a great discussion, and I hope to be back soon.